She is on the ground in Dallas with an update for us right now. Hi, Brooke.
Hi, guys. Yeah, officials spent most of this press conference talking about how this anti-ICE rhetoric has to stop, or you have this violence like this happen. Federal agents, they're just trying to enforce the law, these officials say.
The shootings at ICE facilities in Texas not long ago add to this. And then you have the shooter, who sources identified to Fox News as 29-year-old Joshua John. We're trying to find out more about.
Flashes of gunfire tore through the early morning calm in Dallas, Texas. A lone gunman, perched on a rooftop, unleashed a barrage of bullets at a federal ICE facility, shattering glass, riddling vehicles, and leaving chaos in his wake. Homeland Security confirms 3 people were hit, at least one fatally, before the shooter turned the weapon on himself. It was not a random act. Officials say the attack was deliberate, a targeted strike against federal agents carrying out immigration enforcement. Within hours, the FBI launched a full-scale investigation, labeling the case a potential act of domestic extremism. The scene is now under heavy guard, but the shock ripples far beyond this building. This shooting reignites a dangerous debate. Anti-ICE rhetoric is no longer confined to protests or politics, it is spilling into real violence on American streets. Lawmakers demand answers. Families of agents want protection, and the public is asking, why is hostility toward federal enforcement escalating, and what does this mean for U.S. security going forward? Stay with us as we break down the attack, the suspect, and the national implications. Like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the full investigation and every critical update. Just before sunrise, the silence outside the Dallas immigration facility was ripped apart. Gunfire cracked from above, sharp, relentless, echoing off steel gates and concrete walls. A rooftop sniper had taken position near the federal ICE compound. From that perch, he opened fire on the sally port, the secure entry point where detainees are moved. Bullets ripped into a white transport van, tearing through its frame in seconds. Inside, 3 detainees were caught in the crossfire. Homeland Security confirms 1 man died instantly, another clung to life for moments before collapsing, and a 3rd suffered serious wounds. None of them were ICE officers, none were armed. The gunman never tried to escape. After unloading his rounds, he turned the weapon on himself. By the time agents reached the rooftop, the shooter was already dead. A chilling detail that investigators say underscores intent. This was not a warning shot, not a desperate escape. It was an execution-style ambush, planned and carried out with precision. The time, just before 7 a.m. The place, a federal facility meant to symbolize law and order. The message? Still unclear, but the consequences were immediate. Within minutes, the compound was locked down. Armored vehicles, blocking roads, helicopters circling above. Agents feared a second shooter, a coordinated strike, even a wider plot. For hours, Dallas residents woke to the sound of sirens and the sight of flashing lights, unsure whether the danger had passed or was only beginning. And yet the most jarring fact may be this: no ICE employee was hurt. The sniper aimed at detainees, not officers. Was this an act of hatred against federal power, or a twisted statement about immigration itself? The FBI now labels the case a targeted attack, treating the site like a battlefield crime scene. The gunman's motives remain hidden in silence, but the scene he left behind, shattered glass, blood on steel, agents combing rooftops with rifles ready, has reopened a national wound. If a lone shooter can strike at the heart of America's immigration system before breakfast, what does that say about the rising temperature of the debate? And how many more mornings will begin with gunfire instead of peace? Evidence litters the rooftop like pieces of a grim puzzle. Yellow markers line the concrete where spent shell casings fell. Each casing etched with 2 words, anti-ICE, a chilling signal of motive left behind in brass and gunpowder. Investigators move fast. Within hours, the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI confirmed what many feared. This was not random. It was an attack born of ideology, aimed squarely at the heart of federal enforcement. The suspect's name is now public: Joshua John, 29 years old. a man with no known criminal record, yet carrying the weight of a political grievance. He brought a hunting rifle, modified with a 5-round magazine, into the quiet dawn. It was a weapon designed for precision, and he used it with ruthless intent. Federal agents say Jan fired until the last round was spent, then turned the gun on himself, leaving no chance for interrogation, no manifesto, only fragments of evidence. The FBI released photographs of the scene, an unusual step meant to quiet speculation and prove transparency. The images show shattered glass, bloodied metal, and the rifle left near Jan's body. Officials insist nothing is being hidden. Still, questions multiply. Why carve anti-ice into bullet casings? Why target detainees instead of officers? Was this a lone act of rage, or the echo of a broader movement willing to trade politics for violence? For investigators, every detail matters. The caliber of the rounds, the rooftop vantage point, the shooter's digital footprint, now combed for signs of planning or accomplices. For the public, the message is harder to ignore. Federal facilities are no longer just symbols of policy, but front lines in a widening clash between enforcement and ideology. As the evidence mounts, one truth stands clear: this was not just a crime scene, it was a statement. And if a 29-year-old with a hunting rifle could send shockwaves through America's immigration system, how prepared is the nation for what may come next? It wasn't the first time Dallas woke up to fear. Just last month, the very same ICE facility received a bomb threat. Alarms blared, agents evacuated, and bomb squads swept the grounds. No device was found, but the message was unmistakable. Federal immigration officers were marked targets. Weeks earlier, in July, a different ICE facility in Texas was hit in an even more direct assault. A group of armed men ambushed the building under cover of night, firing on officers as they left the gates. One officer was struck, critically injured, yet survived. That incident was buried in headlines for days, overshadowed by the next crisis, the next flash of violence. Taken together, the pattern is hard to ignore. 3 separate incidents in less than 3 months, all aimed at the same symbol: ICE. Threats, ambushes, now a rooftop sniper. What once looked like isolated outbursts is now being called by officials a systematic campaign, a chain of attacks designed to intimidate, destabilize, and test federal resolve. Law enforcement analysts warn that this escalation follows a troubling script. First come threats, then attempted bombings, then direct armed assaults. Each step more dangerous than the last, each pushing closer to the prospect of mass casualties. Officials say ICE officers have been warned to change routines, vary commutes, and heighten security even at home. The line between duty and danger has blurred, and the risks no longer stop at the gates of federal property. For communities across Texas, the tension is palpable. Families living near these facilities now fear that their neighborhoods have become battlegrounds in a wider struggle over immigration enforcement. And for agents on the ground, the question is more urgent. If 3 attacks can unfold in 3 months, what comes next? Will the next alarm be another false threat or the beginning of something far worse? The political firestorm was immediate. Within hours of the Dallas shooting, the steps of the Capitol echoed with statements and counter-statements. Senator Ted Cruz called for calm, warning that debates over immigration must be fought in the halls of Congress, not in blood on the streets. His words were sharp, but his message clear: violence cannot replace policy. Vice President J.D. Vance struck a similar chord but with a harder edge, vowing that no sniper, no threat, no act of terror would derail federal arrest and deportation operations. "We will not be intimidated," he declared, framing the attack as both a tragedy and a test of national resolve. ICE itself, reeling from the incident, released a stark reminder. Its officers are not political actors, but civil servants, carrying out the laws passed by Congress. "We enforce what the people's representatives decide," the agency said, underscoring that agents on the ground are not lawmakers but law enforcers. Yet, even as leaders called for unity, the rhetoric surrounding ICE itself reignited bitter fault lines. Some politicians, long critical of immigration enforcement, have branded ICE a modern Gestapo. To supporters of the agency, such language is not only inflammatory, it is dangerous. A verbal accelerant poured on an already burning fire. Did those words create the climate where bullets followed speeches? Or are they reflections of a society already fractured by immigration wars? The public reaction mirrored the divide. Vigils formed outside the Dallas facility, with candles flickering for the victims. At the same time, protests erupted in city squares, where demonstrators insisted that ICE remains an institution of fear, not safety. The clash of symbols, candles versus placards, mourning versus defiance, painted a portrait of a nation pulled in opposite directions. One attack, one shooter, one rooftop, but the ripples extend to the highest levels of government, to city streets, and into households across America. The question now hangs in the air. Will this tragedy drive the country toward a sober debate about law and security? Or will it push the immigration battle into an even darker, more dangerous chapter? Behind the flashing lights and crime scene tape lies a quieter fear, the fear of those who wear the ICE badge. Agents tell us many no longer feel safe, even off duty. Some refuse to wear uniforms outside federal grounds, worry that a grocery run or a school pickup could expose their families to danger. Others go further, keeping their identities hidden online, scrubbing social media accounts, and living in a kind of self-imposed anonymity. For them, the Dallas rooftop sniper wasn't an isolated tragedy. It was confirmation that they themselves are targets. The debate over protection has only deepened. California Governor Gavin Newsom's proposal to restrict face coverings for law enforcement sparked outrage among ICE employees. They argue that forcing officers to appear uncovered could make them more vulnerable. Their faces recognizable in a crowd, their names traceable in seconds. Critics ask, in an age where a simple reverse image search can reveal a home address, is removing anonymity a matter of transparency or an invitation to violence? The threat doesn't end at the office. With just a few clicks, personal data addresses, phone numbers, even relatives' profiles can be pulled from public databases and spread across activist networks. ICE warns that this digital exposure creates risks not just for agents, but for their children, their spouses, their elderly parents. In some cases, officers have been doxxed within hours of controversial arrests, their homes surrounded by protesters before sunset. And then there are the detainees themselves. In Dallas, 2 men inside the targeted van died before ever seeing a courtroom. Their loss raises a painful paradox. In protecting the rule of law, the process of law was denied to them. Justice delayed became justice erased, sparking questions not just about security for agents, but about due process for those caught in the system. The tension is unmistakable. Federal officers live under siege, their families shadowed by fear, while detainees die before their cases are heard. If the system cannot shield those enforcing the law or those awaiting its judgment, then what does safety and justice really mean in America today? Shattered glass still glitters on the pavement in Dallas, a haunting reminder of how political anger can turn into deadly gunfire. What began as words of protest became bullets from a rooftop, cutting short 2 lives before sunrise. The FBI now combs through every trace of evidence, searching for where the shooter was radicalized, whether he acted alone, and what warning signs might have been missed. Officials stress one urgent truth. Immigration debates must be fought in legislatures, not on the backs of law enforcement officers doing their jobs. This attack